I mean, can you imagine, Dedrick, when you really look back at the history of cancer therapy from the late 1940s up until 2013, pretty much the only options were chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery. And if you had metastatic disease with a solid tumor, it was never curative. I mean, occasionally something crazy would happen, but the oncologist labeled it palliative therapy.
Right.
Like this is not curative therapy. We're trying to extend your life. Why do you think we went so long with that mindset?
I think that there's like a convergence of factors that play into why, as a society, we will hold on to, therapies that maybe aren't as effective as newer technology does is. Some low-hanging fruit to think about are like economic interests. Drugs being sold for one purpose that would not be sold under another approach that impacts somebody's bottom line, period.
Yeah.
So there's that. Second is, not insidious, but people get set in our ways, right? I think all of us do. And, if you have been trained, educated, you've seen good and bad results as a physician or provider using a particular method that is known. Perhaps you might be of the thinking that what is known is better than what perhaps is not known or what is not as well known. And I think that there was a lot of weight given to the thousands and millions of cases that had used the legacy system, regardless of what those outcomes were, it's known, right? As opposed to going with the unknown, which, for many people intellectually, that's frightening. I think that's another variable. I also think that some of the leaders, of cutting edge technology aren't always the most popular people in the circles that push ideas forward.
Yeah.
Right. And there's some personality associated with that as well that I think allows for decades and decades and decades. It's like perhaps most reasonable scientists would be open-minded to another approach, but maybe wouldn't go on the record or stake their career behind it.
Right.
Because of, oh man, this is going to hurt people's pockets. Now you got all these doctors that say, no, what about this? And then you got these weirdos over here. Like, what do you, how can you, until it becomes mainstream, right? Until it's cool and accepted, science I've seen to a certain degree kind of has a little bit of a bandwagon element to it. Until something reaches a certain tipping point, it's really hard for other thinkers to want to throw their hat behind it.
Yeah.
And I understand the need for intelligent criticism, but, immunology itself isn't new, right? And immunology with cancer isn't new. And there's been data and there's been cases. And regardless of how much more effective we think immunology is, it deserved a broader conversation for a longer period of time than just 2013, 2014, in the last 10 or 15 years. It has deserved that. And for us to just be arriving here, better late than never, right? The proverb is the best time to plant a tree was 1,000 years ago. Second best time is right now. So here we are.
Yeah. It's interesting because like Franco Marincola, who's on our scientific advisory board, he was chief of infectious disease and immunogenetics for the National Institutes of Health. He said, what I used to do just 15 years ago wasn't considered real science.
Right.
And it's unbelievable to think about because, immunotherapy was considered quackery for, just up until really 2013-ish.
Right.
And it really hit mainstream, and the oncologists started to believe it in 2018. That's when you saw, that's when we saw the big change in our hospital. And, it makes me look at everything.
Right.
Like, what are we being told? And I look at, because imagine this, Dedrick. Imagine we would have bought Chipsa. And, we would have never bought it if we believed the mainstream.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I mean, we wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
There's no way. But we knew they were full of shit.
Yeah.
I mean, really. Yeah. They're lying about this stuff not working. There is data.
Right.
They say the data says this, but we have papers and data that say just the opposite.
Right.
You dig into the history of William Coley from 1891 and 1936. The father of immunotherapy in the textbooks today had a higher success rate treating many cancers than we do today. Right. This is with his monologues.
That's right.
So his daughter, Helen Coley Knotts, founded the Cancer Research Institute in 1952 off of his work.
Right.
And for years, they said it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit.
Right.
And look at it now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's taking a step back and looking at the history and the timeline, which I have done many times over the years, is, I think to myself, is there something that I'm not seeing? Is there something that I'm overlooking? Because again, I'm not suggesting that for the past 40 to 80 years, we should have just switched to immunology. I don't know if that would have been the appropriate thing to do. But what should have happened would have been a more open-minded approach by the medical and scientific community to embrace these ideas earlier.
Yeah.
So that we could be further along at this point.
Right.
I think many of the people who are champions, like you talk about Dr. Marion Cole, he knew at some point that immunology would have its day in the sun. The question is when. But the earlier we start, the sooner that day happens, the faster these therapeutics make it to the marketplace, the more lives we can save.
Yes.
Right? That time is money, right? That time is, we can sit here and talk about this, but someone whose family is dealing with cancer and they do not have access to the treatments that they need, they don't have time for mainstream science to catch up. They don't have time for America to get itself together and debate all of these topics and all the journal articles. That is important. That's unbelievably important. But what if those things already existed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
And they existed.
And they existed.
They definitely existed. I mean, when I look at it, I scratch my head because I'll hear Franco, tell me stories about in the 1980s at NIH. He's working with Steve Rosenberg. Steve Rosenberg is the biggest pioneer in immunotherapy at the National Cancer Institute. Ton of respect for him. If it weren't for Steve Rosenberg, I don't think that we would have a lot of what we have today. But he told me the first patient was a melanoma patient they treated with IL-2. And the very first patient got really sick, but they cured the cancer. And he's like, we found a cure for cancer. Oh my gosh, we found a cure. And the next 9 died from the cancer or the treatment combination. IL-2 is very toxic.
Yes.
And for those listening, IL-2 is an immunotherapy. And but he said that one made me know that it could happen. And we had to figure out the mechanisms that caused that remission. And we did have Coley's toxins, though, even before that. I don't think Franco necessarily knew about that. Coley's was hard to make. And actually, you couldn't really patent Coley's toxins, which is the big thing. You couldn't patent it. So there's no money in Coley's toxins. But, the best adjuvant, vaccine adjuvant, Coley's toxins, in my opinion.
Right.
I mean, for cancer specifically. I don't know about for other things. But, when you look at the history and you think about the impact that could have been made with something like Coley's, a consistent batch, even in combination with chemotherapy, you would have actually had some legitimate cures.
Yeah, absolutely.
It wouldn't be a palliative therapy with metastatic stage 4 cancer. You would have had some real cures in there.
Oh, yeah.
And they had that since 1891. Yep. The system, the establishment system attacked him. Yep. I mean, if you look at James Ewing, the Ewing sarcoma comes from James Ewing. He was a major proponent of radiation. And he was Coley's boss at Memorial Hospital, which is now Sloan Kettering. And they butted heads, and he wouldn't let him do it after a while. And, you think about the money and the influence that went into suppress what he was doing.
Right.
And, then you think about what's going on today in society. And so call me a skeptic on everything.
Right.
And people think that we're, very like, with what we do, that we just think this stuff's going to work. Like, no, we're actually very skeptical. Stem cells.
Right.
We're probably the most skeptical stem cell company operators in the world. Like, you do not make a claim. We are not, like, we want to see, we pull the data. And it happened to work really, really well. But, you know, big picture, these things were, we are being lied to about a lot of different things.
Of course.
And there are market forces and, you know, governments and people that might not want real, you know, cures to be out there. And the immunotherapy market has kind of messed that up for cancer.
Oh, big time. So, you know, and thinking at this very, very high level about this and some of the forces that would want to suppress or dilute or confuse, you know, we have to think that, okay, now that the mainstreaming of immunotherapy is happening and we will receive those outcomes, individuals, families will get those outcomes, and those outcomes will be longer, healthier lives. And if one of the forces that potentially did not want to see this is of the mindset that we need to control the growth and the spread of the human population, and something like immunotherapy becomes mainstream, then what is the constraint? What lever do we have to pull? Does that person pull now who, okay, maybe that thought was an action. Maybe they're in a position to constrict certain things, either in government or as the captain of industry or wherever they're at. What lever gets pulled now?
Yeah.
Right. Immunotherapy for cancer is a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely.
For hundreds of thousands of people, period.
Yeah.
Millions of people, if you extrapolate this over decades. Okay, all of those people end up living, or presumably the people that live will live as a response to that treatment. Those people, presumably because of these restrictions, would not have lived. If you're of the mindset that we want to control the population, what you going to do now?
Right. No, exactly.
You know, that's what's kind of like, where is the other curveball coming?
Yeah.
Right? Because this was 120-year-old medical beef that started this, right?
Right.
And it could have been corrected at any point between then and now. Scientists, doctors knew this, right?
Yep.
We're okay. Now it's mainstream. Great. Great for people. Great for humanity. Great for America. Now what? Right? If there are still thoughts and people out there who want to control this, the expanse of our population, how are they going to do it?
Right.
Right.
Well, I mean, you think about how sick our society is, like physically, you know, with what they eat and all the obesity, all the diabetes, all the heart disease at young ages. You think about what is in our food. I'm not sure this is correct, but I would guess that diet is the number one cause
of course.
Of cancer, what we eat. Even if you have some genetic factors, the epigenetics of the environmental factors of what you put in your system probably have more to do with someone getting cancer than anything. And so it is weird that we have the food pyramid, you know, from the 1960s, 1970s, and you have nutritionists that still want to act like that is legit.
It's mind-blowing.
It's mind-blowing. I mean, it really is sick care. And we give people bad things. We give the kids in schools horrible food. None of it's organic. Has a bunch of pesticides, glyphosate, all of this different stuff going into our systems. And so, yeah, I mean, call me a conspiracy theorist at this point.
Right, yeah.
But I don't believe they want people to be healthy.
No. If I had not had this experience on in the hospital, I'd probably be with the masses of, in my understanding and almost to a degree, a defense of the status quo.
Sure.
Because, I wouldn't know. I would be ignorant to what the real alternatives to this are. But you're 100% spot on. I mean, we see just with the detox of people, just with addressing that, right? We're not even talking about any therapeutics that or pills or shots or IVs or anything. Just detoxing people, the change in their overall health.
Oh my gosh.
Is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the only thing that's changed is the food. Right. I mean, that is as clear cut of a example, in my opinion, of how toxic our food supply is.
Yeah.
And it's a massive cause for concern. I think that we place a lot of trust on food regulators. And I think that at least since COVID, some of that trust perhaps has eroded away. And I think that might be a good thing to start questioning our food.